I zdravo. Nastavljamo dalje s ovom predivnom konferencijom. With this fantastic conference, we are continuing. So, next up, I have this wonderful opportunity to announce our next session. Just before we actually get to the meaty part of this next session, now let me just kind of lend a minute or two of your time just for a quick introduction. So, as you know, like Nordeus, and basically Nordeus through like many of its facilities like Nordeus Foundation has opened doors to many community projects and also like boosted the local gaming ecosystem a lot. So me as like a representative of Nordeus, I have a little bit of a twofold role here today. So as well, Nordeus on one side, it's also my pleasure like to be an ambassador of CGA as well. You know, like sharing work, networking, meeting people, listening to all these wonderful talks as well, and trying to spread the word, like being some kind of an evangelist for the conference as well. But I'm also here to kind of announce a little bit a topic which kind of paves the way for something a little bit different and fresh from the Nordeus studio. You know, like working for Nordeus or any other gaming studio, like for that matter, it's not just about making beautiful games or beautiful art if you're an artist like me, or making beautiful football if you're making football games like Nordeus is. There's also like a very great deal of like business thinking and business processes that you need to experiment on, that you need to iterate and then utilize to help you to kind of drive innovation, but in a very specific user-centric way. Many of us, like working on games, whether or not we are like artists or developers or not, we are at least a little bit, designers by vocation. Some of us maybe even more than just a little bit. But we're not always like natural-born marketeers. You know, we don't really know how to sometimes address the user and sell the product. Well, neither was Milovan Dekić, our next speaker, when he joined Nordeus. He's actually a sociologist, but in Nordeus, his skill set is utilized through his role as a user research lead, where he basically deals with kind of obtaining and synthesizing various and very kind of rich insights that later on fuel much better product decisions for any and all gaming things that we have. And this kind of whole process of design thinking, like he nailed it so good, so much that he actually wrote a book about it with his colleague. And now we have this wonderful and unique opportunity to hear actually him walking us through the process in this crash course per se. So let me welcome to the stage a great man who is like both my colleague and a very emotional dancer, if I may say so, especially if he's like in a pool surrounded by inflatable pink flamingos and the song is just perfect. Don't ask me how I know. Okay, so let's welcome Milovan Dekić.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you for this wonderful and informative introduction. I'm really honored to be here and to speak with you today. So, as Nicola said, the topic for today, as you can see, as it was announced, the topic is actually design thinking. As we framed it here, it's design thinking as a process for innovation. So a lot of things that I'm going to talk about today are dealing with the problem of creativity. And now when I realize to what kind of audience I'm speaking, I realize that you are probably much more creative than I am. So I really hope that this talk will at least give you some kind of inspiration to maybe start doing certain things that you didn't thought about previously. So before I start, as Nicola said, what I'm going to talk about today is based on a book which I co-wrote with my colleague. As you can see him here on the right side. It's Marko Jeftić. So around 2 years ago, as we were basically design thinking is we're gonna see what is it about, but at one point in time we realized that we were doing a lot of design thinking, and then we got an idea, not so creative one, I believe, to write a book about it, and we did it, and we published it last year, I would say. So what I'm gonna talk about today is basically what we wrote in that book. there is really a lot of different ways to try to define this thing called design thinking. Like recently, I saw a meme comparing two things: design thinking on one side, and on the other side, a person, uh, taking a shower and getting a creative aha idea. So currently, there is like a lot of talk about this framework or a process, and as I could see, there are some people messing it up with creativity. And by the end of this talk, I believe I will try to assure you that that's not really the same thing. Rather, design thinking is about trying to utilize the creativity of a bunch of individuals working together and using basically a collective brain of a certain group of people which work together in order to solve some user problem or create some product. So to start, I'm going to throw a couple of definitions throughout this talk, but we could start with this definition of design thinking. A more common sense one would be, because we are talking about design, it's really about design thinking is really a framework for how to design things. So design thinking in a broader perspective is a set of mental models, methods, and techniques that should enable you to create innovative solutions by solving user problems. So this is important thing to highlight. So design thinking is really a bunch of methods, if you would like. And if you would like maybe to introduce this line of thinking into your organization or even into your daily work, one way that you do not need to go is to try doing all of the things I'm gonna talk about. You really should try thinking about what are the problems that you are experiencing as a designer, as a product person, as a business person. So you could pick any of the things and try to implement them into your work routine or into the work routine of your work group, colleagues, and so on. So I'm going to start with a simple example, which highlights what the design thinking is about. Also, so uh, years ago, when IBM was developing the so-called speech-to-text technology, so basically you are talking and you can see your words written on the interface. How IBM approached it. So um, there was basically a decision in front of them. They could invest a lot of money and time into pushing that product, and that might be a good way to go. But they were smart enough, or I would say creative enough, in two ways. First, they wanted to find out how would potential users of this technology react to it. Are they gonna like it? Are they gonna use it? Would those users do something different about that product? So they were asking themselves those questions. And let's start with that. One example of design thinking: asking yourself, I'm gonna create this thing, but are users going to like it? That's design thinking. On the other hand, in order to answer to that question, they needed to come up with a way to test that with users. And so the twofold way in which IBM was doing design thinking: first, coming up with a question, and second, coming up with an experiment to test their idea that users will like this. And the way they tested it was basically they were bringing users, and instead of fully developing the technology, investing money and people and time, they have put a secretary into a separate box or a room next to the one where they were bringing users. And as users were like testing this technology, basically they were speaking and they could see the text being written on the screen. It was not the technology that was working that, rather it was a secretary typing on a machine what was user talking. And that's really amazingly good way of testing the idea. And after the entire process, they were aware of the certain problems with this technology, and up to a certain period they decided not to pursue it in a way they initially wanted to do it. So this is just like an easy example to give you a glimpse what design thinking is about. I'm going to throw, as I said, a couple of definitions. And one of the definitions of design thinking might be that it is a way to find out early on if your product idea is going into the right direction. I assume that this is a great question for all of us to ask ourselves. Is this thing that we're working on good? Will users like it or love it or maybe hate it and abandon it? So the initial step of every design thinking, let's say, process is simply called empathy. So what is empathy? Because most of the time, what we are doing is designing things. Let's say if you're designing a character, in most situations, it is not about us who are designing it that we need to love it. Rather, a more massive group of people need to like that one and love it and engage with it probably over time. So, what design thinking gives us advice is you should put yourself in the shoes of others, potential users or customers, or even colleagues, so that we can try to understand their worldview, how they look at things. Do they care about the things that we care about, or they are different than us? And in most of the situations, if you try to apply this, you will see that they could be that those users could be quite different than us. So design thinking says whenever you start designing a thing, try to look at problems from the perspective of others. I'm gonna use this example. Now when I realize to what kind of audience I'm talking, I'm pretty sure that you watched this Netflix Netflix documentary, right? It's called Toys of Our, something like that. Toys Toys that made us. Yeah, and there was a wonderful example of doing exactly this, doing this empathy thing while creating and developing a product. So if you watched it, now I'm gonna assume that you did, but in essence, what was the idea when they were developing the character of He-Man? In order to, so Mattel, when they were developing it, they were asking themselves, okay, this character of ours, what he should resemble, what should be his values, and so on, how we should present it to the potential audience, and in this case, it was kids. What they did was again a brilliant example of design thinking. The managers went to the homes of kids. So in order to better understand what they should give to that audience, they were spending time with kids. They were spending time with the potential users, and they did that in order to understand them better, to understand what matters to that audience or to those kids. And by spending time, by observing them, how they play, what are the toys with which they play, they understood that, quite simple, kids care about power. And whenever I'm talking about this example, and when I was watching the Netflix documentary, I'm going back to my childhood, and even today, whenever I see this scene of He-Man bringing out his sword and yelling, I have the power. I'm always like really amazed by watching that. And they came up with that idea, with that tagline of "I have the power" by really listening to the kids who told them that while they were playing with their toys, they were telling that they like and they want to have power. So this is a brilliant example. Again, I would assume more from your industry, but it's an inspiring story of how they have created insights about what matters to users, and basically they utilized that coming from this simple kind of research that they did. An important thing that also design thinking highlights is a difference between a problem and a solution. And I'm going to give you a simple example of this. Design thinking insists on making a difference between a problem and a solution, right? So in this case, if we have pizza, so pizza is a solution for the problem, and the problem is hunger. So it could be always easy to ask users what they like about pizza, what they don't like, and so on. But a way much better approach is really to understand the underlying need behind and beneath all of the solutions that users are currently using. I'm going to talk about this more in a second. I would like to just show you a simple example of this, and I'm really hoping that I did the technical setup right and that you're gonna hear the video that I'm gonna play.
Hi, my name's Clay Christensen. I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School. I brought with me a set of puzzles, all related to innovation. We decided that the way we teach marketing is at the core of what makes motivation difficult to achieve. The most helpful way we've thought of it so far is that we actually hire products to do things for us. And understanding what job we have to do in our lives for which we would hire a product is really the key to cracking this problem of motivating customers to buy what we're offering. So I wanted just to tell you a story about a project we did for one of the big fast food restaurants. They were trying to goose up the sales of their milkshakes. They had just studied this problem up the gazoo. They brought in customers who fit the profile of the quintessential milkshake consumer. And they'd give them samples and ask, could you tell us how we can improve our milkshakes so you'd buy more of them? Do you want it chocolatey or cheaper, chunky or chewier? They get very clear feedback. They would then improve the milkshake on those dimensions, and it had no impact on sales or profits whatsoever. So one of our colleagues went in with a different question on his mind, and that was, I wonder what job arises in people's lives that cause them to come to this restaurant to hire a milkshake. So we stood in a restaurant for 18 hours one day and just took very careful data. What time did they buy these milkshakes? What were they wearing? Were they alone? Did they buy other food with it? Did they eat it in the restaurant or drive off with it? It turned out that nearly half of the milkshakes were sold before 8 o'clock in the morning. The people who bought them were always alone. It was the only thing they bought, and they all got in the car and drove off with it. So to figure out what job they were trying to hire it to do, we came back the next day and stood outside the restaurant so we could confront these folks as they left, milkshake in hand. And in language that they could understand, we essentially asked, excuse me, please, but I got to sort this puzzle out. What job were you trying to do for yourself that caused you to come here and hire that milkshake? And they'd struggle to answer, so we'd then help them by asking other questions like, well, think about the last time you were in the same situation, needing to get the same job done, but you didn't come here to hire a milkshake. What did you hire? And then as we put all of their answers together, it became clear that they all had the same job to do in the morning, and that is they had a long and boring drive to work. And they just needed something to do while they drove to keep the commute interesting. One hand had to be on the wheel, but somebody had given them another hand and there wasn't anything in it. And they just needed something to do while they drove. They weren't hungry yet, but they knew they'd be hungry by 10 o'clock. So they also wanted something that would just pull down there and stay for their morning. Good question. What do I hire when I do this job? You know, I've never framed the question that way before, but last Friday, I hired a banana to do the job. Take my word for it, never hire bananas. They're gone in 3 minutes. You're hungry by 7:30. If you promise not to tell my wife, I probably hire donuts twice a week, but they don't do it well either. They're gone fast. They crumb all over my clothes. They get my fingers gooey. Sometimes I hire bagels, but as you know, they're so dry and tasteless. Then I have to steer the car with my knees while I'm putting jam on them. And then if the phone rings, we got a crisis. I remember I hired a Snickers bar once, but I felt so guilty. I've never hired Snickers again. Let me tell you, when I come here and hire this milkshake, it is so viscous that it easily takes me 20 minutes to suck it up that thin little straw. Who cares what the ingredients are? I don't. All I know is I'm full all morning and it fits right here in my cup holder. Well, it turns out that the milkshake does the job better than any of the competitors, which in the customer's minds are not Burger King milkshakes, but it's bananas, donuts, bagels, Snickers bars, coffee, and so on. But I hope you can see how, if you understand the job, how to improve the product becomes just obvious.
Technically, this worked perfectly. So this also brings me to another example of Netflix. So when they did an interview, again, this is in terms of what are the needs or jobs that products are solving for the customers of your users. It goes back to that. When they asked Reed Hastings, what is the main competitor of Netflix? He had a wonderful answer, and the answer was, it's really everything else that you did while you were not watching Netflix. So playing a board game, sleeping, working, drinking a bottle of wine, or playing a Fortnite. So we all have this problem of like let's say boredom, and we are trying to solve that one. So whatever you are doing instead of using a specific product in a certain amount of time, that could be considered the competitor of the thing that you're working on. So this is a wonderful example of how you should really frame what are you searching when doing the empathy thing, understanding what is the core need or the core job that user has, and basically with your product what you should do is to try to satisfy that need or help them to execute the job that they have. Okay, so remember, if you are working on a product or on a solution, try spending time with your users, because one of the sides of that activity, it's gonna be that they will broaden your perspective. The users could also spark you new ideas. You will learn a lot about them, and you will probably realize that they have a different worldview than you, and always let users to inspire you. Okay, additional definition of design thinking is really about putting yourself in the shoes of your users and putting their needs into the core of your product or a solution. Next thing that design thinking advises you to do is to try to really think clearly about the user problem that you're solving. I'm gonna kick off with this wonderful quote from Einstein. You probably heard it, and it wonderfully applies to design thinking. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. And usually, again, from my perspective, to even sketch a solution is kind of easy, but if you are doing the right thing, you are really never completely sure. And that's why it would be great if you could spend some additional time in thinking if you are going to solve the right thing. So a small example for this one. If you're thinking about a group of people who are waiting for the elevator and let's assume you hear them telling you that the elevator is slow. One thing that you could do is hire engineers, invest huge amounts of money, and buy or develop faster elevators. But that if you are if you think more clearly about what is the problem with the elevator being slow, it might be something different. It might be that the problem is really not elevators being slow, but rather people being bored while waiting for it. So if you reframe this, you might come with much easier and cheaper solutions to the real problem that users are having. So if you're thinking in terms of their needs, in this case, that could be it's really being bored while waiting. You can try to engage them in different ways. So playing music, putting the mirrors in front of them so that they can enjoy by watching themselves, and so on. So this is a wonderful mental model telling you that maybe sometimes you do not need to go like with massive projects investing hundreds of millions. There might be a simple fix for a certain problem if you are rethink it properly. This is again a wonderful example of the problem, not the problem where people do not want to wait for the red light, for the green light to come while waiting on the crossroads. This is a startup who realized that the main problem that the users are having is being bored with waiting. So they wanted to come up with a solution to fill up their time in a fun way while doing that boring activity of waiting. And this is again a wonderful quote. Customers really don't care about your solution. They don't care about it. What they care about is their problems, and they are thinking about how to solve problems. So they don't care about your solution. Remember, try to spend some time by rethinking the problem that you're solving, because if you do not solve the right problem and the important problem that users have, you might come up with a thing or a solution that is obsolete and that users do not care about. Again, what is design thinking version 3? I believe it is about reframing and rethinking the correct user problems. Next thing that design thinking advises is using the collective brain of your group of people, workers, colleagues, friends. And it really advises to try to utilize that collective thing by giving everybody an opportunity to come up with an awesome way of solving a certain problem. This is, I believe you also know this model framework, a double diamond. So what we are talking about here is really this explore phase. And it really advises us, if we are brainstorming the solution for the users, we should really allow ourselves as a group to go quite broad with potential solutions. And in the end, we will come back with the one which makes most sense. We will come up a way to vote for it or any other way, but we should really enable all of us to spark their part of creativity and enable them to bring any potential awesome solution for the problem that we are solving. This is a wonderful example. I'm not sure if they did it by design thinking way, but this example is great because it's really counterintuitive. This is a cheer park in PUBG. I guess we all know about Fortnite, but PUBG, again, for those who don't know, it's an extremely competitive game based on Battle Royale mode. Everybody's killing everybody else. But there is a mode in this game where what you're roasting a chicken, and you are playing some fun games with other players, with which you are supposed to battle actually against inside of the core game. But this is a wonderful example. If you are thinking more clearly about the problem and go broad with the potential solution, you might realize that the essence of competing against others shouldn't be just killing them. Rather, it's It's a part of a broader motivation of socializing. So you might kill them and enjoy that in the game, but on the other hand, you might spend and have good times with them inside a more specific thing rather than just killing. So here, roasting a chicken, playing a game, and so on. So this is a wonderful example of how ideas could go really broad and in the end up as a great solution for relaxing the players inside an extremely competitive setting. Remember, always allow others to generate the crazy ideas, utilize the collective brain of the group, and always try to level up the ideas of others rather than just rather than finding out the reasons why certain idea is bad. Fourth, I would say definition of design thinking is really about utilizing the collective brain of your group. Fourth step, if we call it a step, you might skip the previous steps and jump straight into this one. But in this phase, design thinking advises that you should, once you have an idea, you should try to create something tangible out of it. What you should really do is to, whenever you have an idea around what something should be, you should be extremely clear about what brings the most value in your idea to the user. What is the most delighting thing? What is the thing that they will be excited about? When they see it, they will tell it, oh, I understand, this is way much better than some other thing or character that I'm playing or using, and so on. And you should always think, so once you have an idea of how something what something should be, could be, what you should do is try to create a prototype out of it. Prototypes could vary, but for example, just a sketching it, as you probably majority of you do, sketching it on a type of paper and then showing it to the user. This is extremely valuable. So this is a wonderful example of a, let's say, pre-computer. So this was an idea of even before mobile phones. And this is basically a wood with a piece of paper on it. This reminds us of mobile phones. But even before it was developed as a computer, the creator had a wonderful idea, going back to the IBM example, how he should test it. So he had a piece of wood, put the paper on it, and he had it in his pocket. So whenever he was, let's say, in a pub or among a group of friends, he would bring it out. And usually the rest of the people reacted to it. What is it? What it is about? I never seen something like this, and so on. So this was a wonderful small hack of how the idea was prototyped quite cheaply, and then it was being shown to the potential users who could then react to it. I like it, dislike it, not sure how this could work, and so on. But this is a really wonderful example. Another quick example is the guy who created Product Hunt. So it's Ryan Hoover. And instead of, the platform, I believe some of you know about it. It's called Product Hunt. It was sold, I believe, to Angel Lists maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And how he created the platform. He believed that there was a space for that kind of platform among the people on the internet, but he wasn't completely sure about it. So what he did, he basically generated a link, which he spread out via Twitter, I believe, and he said to himself, if my idea makes any sense, I believe, let's say 100 users will apply to this link via Twitter. So what he didn't do, develop a full platform. Rather, he was clear in his thinking, and he said, if there is any potential inside this idea, people will apply to this simple link. He spread it, and he got way much more subscribers than he initially planned or wanted to have. And that was a signal to him that that platform, Product Hunt, in the end, was a good thing to develop. So again, wonderful example of design thinking. So Try to prototype as early as possible. It should also increase the clarity of your idea, what it actually should be, and it will really enable you to test with users and to see with them how they feel about it quite early in the stage of developing it. So version 5 of design thinking, it's really about materializing your thoughts and ideas. And in the end, what design thinking advises you to do is to test your ideas. We all believe we are creative and smart, and that we are creative and smart, and we are. But it is always a great idea to what you are working on to give to the users and see how they feel about it, how they are experiencing it. Is there anything that blocks their enjoyment inside the thing that you're working on? It's always a good moment and opportunity to give the thing that you're working on to the users and put it inside their hands. There is many different ways to do this. This is I believe example from a Google guy. So you could go, as we did, you could go to the coffee shop. You can find even a random guy or lady and ask them if they would like to give you feedback on their idea, and they can really bring you a lot of valuable things about how they feel towards your product, what they understand, don't understand, what they like, dislike, and so on. So it's always a good moment to do this. And there are really various ways what you can ask the potential users or audience about your product. So how would they describe the overall experience with the product? Can maybe they think of any other product that resembles this one? So maybe you are creating something which already exists. Is there anything about the product that you would that users would like to keep in a way it is currently? Is there anything that they specifically dislike about it? Is there anything that they do not understand about the thing that you're developing? And if they are the CEO or if they are some wizards, what they would change about the product? And always make sure to ask them additional why question to explain you why they dislike something or like, and so on. That's really why is the key question here. And this is a simple framework where you could map how the users felt, what they liked, disliked, what could be improved, and if maybe the users gave you any kind of ideas what you could add. So the more early you understand you're a wrong path, the better. Check in the very beginning if you're creating something that nobody needs, and please let users inspire you in their own way. And final definition of design thinking is about testing your ideas early on.
Dekić, can you wrap this up in a minute?
Yep. So this is a framework of how Google implemented this. So basically, design sprints. You can spend 5 days doing all of the things that I talked about. So on Monday to try to understand and talk with users. On Tuesday to understand what is the problem that you're gonna solve and generate ideas. On Wednesday you could decide what you're gonna make. On Thursday you could prototype it. And finally, on Friday, you could find users and give them what you have created and see how they feel about it. And that's pretty much it in a minute. Thank you.
I think that you really practice this timing. Really nice on.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Milovan. Thank you, Dekić. I have a couple of questions. Some of them are from the audience and some of them are from me if you have time. So let me start with the first question from Elisaveta Obradović. And she says, using concept walkthrough with users right after the research phase. So do you think it's better to do it more with like solid prototypes, or is it fine to do like mock-ups at this stage?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say the better developed the product is, the better. I mean, the prototype. So the higher fidelity, the better. But what you could do also is really having a sketch on the paper, and that could be good enough, I would say, if you have good questions prepared for the users. But of course, the better fidelity, the better, the more reliable informations you're gonna get, I mean, the less users will need to imagine and invent in their hands what this thing could be. So really, if you do not have anything, that's the worst case scenario, but good enough. If you have anything fully developed, even better, but maybe too late. So it's really whatever you're working on, it should be good enough in the moment that you're making that decision.
Fantastic. So Veljko asks, was there a time when you realized that you made a mistake in the design approach, but it was too late to change direction? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Well, yes. I mean, that's because I didn't. I mean, I didn't design anything, so I didn't experience that on my own skin as a guy who developed something. And then I was like, oh man, I did it all wrong. But of course, you realize that in the end, what you could do if it's not too late, like mentally and financially. And in any other case, you can go back to the drawing board and try to resketch the idea that you had and start again.
And reframe the problem, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And I'll ask the last question, then really need to wrap this wonderful talk up. So if the empathy is kind of at the beginning, at the foundation of this whole process, and not all people actually have empathy, do you have any suggestions for people how to develop it?
Yes. By spending time with two things. Trying to spend time with people who are different than you, to try to go out of your comfort zone, and realize that if you do not go to any extreme groups, but to, let's say, some, I don't know, middle groups, who are not so far away from you, and see that could be interesting. Try to listen to their stories. Let them inspire you. So whenever I witnessed that people are doing it, it was always a relevating experience for them. You know, I couldn't imagine that they are thinking like that. This was really interesting, and so on. So it really can break that barrier between you and your creativity and others. So try to spend time with people who are different than you. Try to listen to their stories, to understand them, and in the end, really try to think if that can bring an inspiration for you. And I'm pretty much sure in 80% of cases, it will spark certain ideas inside you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Milovan. I really suggest everyone to read the book. If you want a signed copy, maybe I can arrange something. I don't know. We can talk about it. Well, thank you all in the audience. Thank you, Milovan, and thank you, CGA, for this opportunity. I hope this was interesting, and I think that we can move on. See you soon, everyone.